Hi there, it's Natasha and thank you so much for joining me today. Today we are going to create a background and then kind of slice it up and repiece it back together. Now I am going to start off with 3 pieces of coloured cardstock. Now I have very little coloured cardstock in my stash, but as I was cleaning through and sorting through some things, I found 3 shades of blue, so I thought this would be a great project for them. I'm going to start off with this stamp here, and I am purposefully going for a stamp that is nice and big to cover up as much space as I can. However, you can do exactly the same thing with multiple stamps and just put them all on your acrylic block or all on the lid of your stamping tool. So I am going to pop this in. Now there are 2 different ways to do this project. This is one way and I will explain the other way in a little minute as well. So I'm putting down some anti-static powder tool and I am going to heat emboss this. So I am going to use some VersaMark sticky embossing ink. Make sure that your VersaMark or your embossing ink is nice and juicy. There's nothing worse than a really dry embossing pad, and that way you often don't get a good impression. So you can see that it's left a little bit of an impression, the VersaMark, and I'm going to do the same on all 3 sheets here. Now the 2 different ways that you can do this are you can either stamp first and cut second, or you can cut first, put them back together how you want them to, and then stamp the entire image later. Sometimes I find the second way a little bit trickier because I run the risk of getting embossing powder stuck in the cracks and things. So I usually go with this method, but definitely both methods work fine. So you'll see as we go along what I'm going to do. I'm going to add some white embossing powder to all 3 of these panels. And I do suggest that if you have a choice between fine or, regular or super fine, then you should definitely go with the super fine embossing powder, because that way you just have to have one on hand. And with any more detailed sentiments or detailed images, you can use that super fine embossing powder without muddying up the image or blurring any of the lines. So super fine is what I always tend to go for if it is available. Now I'm just going to melt all 3 of these panels. All 3 of them are ready to go. Don't worry that the stamp is actually a little bit smaller on all 3 of the panels, because we will figure that out soon. And then I did have a very cute little helper come and sit on my knee, and he loves giving a little wave. He finds it super magical that he can put his hands down there and they appear up on the screen. So he's giving you a really big wave, and then that was the end of crafting. So later on I came back to this so that I could kind of focus and look down on the measurements. It's a little bit hard with a wiggling person on my knee. He just wants to do all the fun inking and things, so we had a little bit of fun time inking, and then I came back to this project later in the evening, and this is where I'm going to cut it down. So I have actually written down the measurements off screen. It does not matter where you cut, but you need to keep it the same for each panel. So for me, I think I was going around 1/2 inch, 1 inch, maybe 1/4 or 3/8 of an inch, and then 1/2 inch, and then 1.5 inches. Whatever you do, keep it all the same. So you can see here to the right, just on the very edge of my screen, I am making sure that I cut the same sized piece so that when we piece them all together, they all are exactly lined up. So you can see that I'm keeping them the same and doing all 3. Now, as I said, you can do this the opposite way and put them together first and then stamp second, but I kind of find this way just as fun, and I really love piecing together all of the already embossed images. So either. Now here's the fun bit. I have a piece of copy paper. This is nice and thin. You can add whatever adhesive you want on the back here. I'm just adding a tiny little bit of the liquid adhesive that I use, which is the Ranger Multi-Medium in the matte finish. Now we are going to do this project today, and there are lots of different versions of this on YouTube available. However, I wanted to step it up, and I'm going to show you a couple of different things you can do to kind of take this to the next level. And not even necessarily just on this kind of project, on any project at all. So I'll do that in just a minute, but I'm finishing up. I'm using all 3 different shades here, and I did cut my little panel behind of the copy paper to be a little bit smaller so that it didn't hang over the edges, but we'll end up cutting these down a little bit as well. So as you would figure out, I can make 3 different panels from this as well. Now I can do any kind of mix match that you want, but I kind of thought here I was going to go a little bit different than what I'd done on the previous one. But you can put these together however you wish. You can choose to use as many different types. You could even emboss more pieces, 4 pieces or 5 pieces, but 3 was enough for me in this because that's all the coloured paper that I had available, the coloured cardstock. So I'm piecing these all together, and I'm just going to show you these 2 on screen just because you get the gist of it by now. So it's nice and easy to line up with liquid adhesive. However, you could definitely just use tape runner, or you could use some double-sided adhesive sheets and put that down on the copy paper. There's lots of different ways to go about it. So now I am going to trim this down now because we're getting towards adding some of the finer details. And I like the look of having the white border on my cards. But again, if you had used a different stamp set, or you use lots of different stamps put together, then you might not have to trim off any of the edges if you didn't like that border look on your finished card base. Because all of my card bases are 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches, and that means by trimming off a little bit, and I'm going to keep it nice and even around all of the edges, this panel comes down to 4 by 5 1/4 inches. Now I released a card a little while ago on my channel, a short while ago, called a floating circle card, and I got a whole lot of questions around cutting acetate, and that some acetates worked and some didn't, and it was working well for others and some for not. Anyway, here I just want to take a quick second. On the right is the embossable window plastic. This one happens to be from Judikins, and embossable means that you can use your heat tool, so you can emboss and it won't melt the plastic, it won't all crumple up. And that's really important, obviously. And these are the 2 acetates that I use in my crafting. So the embossable one is obviously for when I'm using a heat tool in any way. Then this one here, which is the Hero Arts. Now I'm going to really focus in here. It says works well with metal dies and great for using for shaker cards and all that stuff. So this one is one that I can die cut really easy. Now I'm not saying that these are the only 2 brands at all, but I'm just purely showing you that there is a difference and that I do end up using 2 different acetates in my card making. So depending on what project I've got and what I think I'm going to do down the track, I definitely pick which acetate is going to work well for that. So for today I want to do some heat embossing, so I'm going to use the Judikins one. So I have added the same things. I've got the anti-static powder bag first, and then the VersaMark embossing ink, the sticky embossing ink, and then I'm going over it with exactly the same white embossing powder, and you can see I can heat set this without any warping at all, which is exactly what I want. And then all I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to cut out some of these big flowers. Now I know this kind of feels like a shame to cut into this, but this is just another way that you can kind of add another layer or another texture. I wanted to make it nice and shiny, but only some of the flowers. I don't want it to be super overwhelming. Now I could have used something like glossy accents as well at the end of my project to go over it, but I wasn't sure how the glossy accents would react to the gaps in between the paper piecing that we did. So I don't want to risk it, especially when I get near the end of my card. So I'm just going to fussy cut out these. Now you don't have to be super fussy because it's got a nice thick white border on the flowers, and of course we're going to pop it down onto the exact same white border. So even if it's a little bit not perfect, it doesn't matter, you won't be able to see it. It'll blend in with the white that is behind it as well. So I am cutting out all 3 of the different little flowers here, but I think I only end up putting on 2 just because I didn't need that 3rd one. And then for my sentiment here, I have this one, which is the Word Fragments. This is a really good stamp set. You've seen me use it lots and lots of times. Very versatile. And I'm just going to stamp this down using some VersaFine Clair ink. Now I had these 2, which is the Belle and the Paradise. And I ended up stamping, this is the Paradise. I was just trying to see which blue would work really well with the blues that I already had there on the left. And the Belle one, the darker one, definitely worked better. So that's one I'm going to go with, and I'm going to cut it out with some of the long Tim Holtz scissors. I find these ones nice and easy for cutting out really nice and straight, big, long sentiments. You could also do this in your paper trimmer as well. That would work really well. And then here's where I'm going to add a little bit of double-sided tape. Now the good thing here is that the center of these flowers has enough white embossing that it is going to completely hide this. So you're not going to be able to see it at all. The next thing I want to do to step up this card a little bit is add a good layer of shimmer onto just the flowers. So I'm doing a couple of things to the flowers to make them stand out, and again I think this just takes card making sort of to the next level. It's those little finishing touches, even though the card looks beautiful as is. So as I said, these are all optional. It's not things that you should do when you're card making at all. It's just options, and sometimes you might choose one and not the other, but it's fun to know different techniques that you can choose from. So I am adding a really nice layer of glitter here, and whatever lighting I had, it's picking it up beautifully. So you can definitely see it. And then when I add the acetate here, you could actually pop this up as well on a little foam dot, because that white in the middle hides it so well. But I didn't need too much dimension on this card. I'm just going to put that adhesive right in the center, and you can't see it at all. It's kind of hard to show the acetate on camera a little bit because it just shines and you just get glare. But yeah, I really like this look in real life. It's nice to add something a little bit special to the flowers without taking away from the technique where you kind of added all of those layers back together. Now I did just get this as a new splash out purchase for me. I have never had a corner rounding tool, so I did get one, and I'm just getting used to it, but I think I'm going to like it. I have been wanting one for a really long time, so that has been a big splash out purchase for me. So yeah, I'll see how I go and see if I end up really liking it or not. I know that they are super popular and they came out years and years and years ago, but that's me, a bit late to the party. And then I have added it down with the 4 pieces of adhesive going around the side so that I can line it up nice and even. Then I just need to pop on my little sentiment, and we'll be away laughing. Now I know that this card was nothing crazy or different or brand new, but I had a whole lot of fun creating it, and sometimes it's nice to kind of go back and do those techniques that I forget about sometimes, and it's nice to go back and add some little twists and turns on it and kind of have fun crafting, because that is definitely what I do, and this is why I do it. Doing this makes me happy. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this card, and I really look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks, bye!